Hey, devoted listener, this is John and Joree, and we are back with another episode of Love Isn't Enough.
Hello, we're so glad you tuned in today. I think this conversation is going to be really valuable because we're going to be talking about how to manage unresolvable differences or conflicts within your relationship.
So, what are unresolvable conflicts? Unresolvable conflicts are the vast majority of things that you fight about in your relationship. In fact, research from the Gottmans shows it's about two-thirds of the stuff that you fight about are actually, there's no resolution. You can't agree on how to deal with it.
That is an astounding percentage to me. Every time I say that to a client, every time we talk about that, literally two-thirds of the issue you and your partner are struggling over doesn't have a fix to
And
make it better for both of you.
yeah, and think about that. Like, that's huge, 67%. So that means we're just fighting about stuff or disagreeing about stuff or arguing about things that we're never going to come to an agreement on. So we just keep fighting about it.
So, even as we're starting off this conversation, I invite you to just pay attention to begin to increase your awareness and notice, what are the areas in my life that I keep fighting with my partner about that is never actually going to change? And even that awareness in and of itself of some of those differences can start to be the thing to lead you to greater resolution because you realize maybe I can set this down and not have to continue to stay in a battle mode or a righteous of I'm right, you're wrong because of our differences.
Yeah, and just a few examples. I mean, we're going to jump off into the deep end on into politics here in just a minute, but other ones are, how do we spend our free time? Do you want to go out or do you want to stay in? How do we raise the kids? How do we spend money? And these are typical or pretty classic areas of conflict. And we usually have complementary styles. Like, one person is a free spender, doesn't want to budget. The other one is very tight and thrifty.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Well,
classic.
and I think this really speaks to early on in relationship, we're attracted to qualities that might complement what we lack or what we don't really have very much of. And what is it you always say, John? You always talk in a really good way about this, of how the things that early on are the things
But the
that
things that
excite us.
attract us to each other are the things that annoy us, the very same things that annoy the shit out of us later.
Okay, what was something you were attracted to me that then became annoying?
Attention to detail.
Okay, give an example, please.
Well, actually, I can't really think how it was attractive, but I can think how it was annoying.
You totally failed the question. That wasn't my question. Okay, maybe perhaps I got an answer for you. Okay,
Okay.
I'm gonna answer for him. I think perhaps how organized I was, and maybe like had some cleanliness and organization in my home was like, oh, that's a really nice thing. That probably would, help me find things better or not feel
That's a
so
much better reframe.
so cluttered. And then it became, oh shit, she's gonna want me to be like that.
Well, and I think,
I don't know. I could
well,
be
no, I
teasing,
think
but
it's a
is
good
that something?
example because I think, like, your house is immaculate, which I love, and I enjoy the orderliness of it. And then, when I got further into it, it's like, oh my gosh, there's all these rules around how to keep things clean, like crumbs on the counter and what which part of the sink you wanted the
Crumbs are the
sponge
bane
put
of my
in,
existence.
and and how to put pillows on the bed, and so there was these rules that you had, as I called them, that became a little constrictive to me.
Okay, that was a fear of us living together. And now that we live together, how are my strict rules?
I'm much more in tune with them, and I'm much more accepting of them.
Yeah. Well, and I think it helps create a good environment for the both of
Well,
us.
and I think we've leaned into it on both parts, on both sides, right?
Right.
I think you're accepting that I'm not as cleanly as you, I'm not as organized, I'm not as neat, and I try really hard to be organized and neat.
And I accept that you are who you are. And I appreciate when you turn towards fulfilling my needs of wiping up crumbs or the hair you shave off your face in the bathroom sink.
Yeah, and part of it is that, like, I don't see detail really well because my eyes are they've been through a lot of trauma and damage, and so that was part of it, which
Right.
was interesting. I remember sharing that with a client, and he went home and shared that with his partner, and the partner immediately was like, oh yeah, weaponized incompetence. And I was like, wow, that's harsh. Like she doesn't even know me and she's judging me.
Right. Well, I think, okay, so we often find so many couples resonate with the small details of the frustrations people have, and the kitchen crumbs.
Oh, wait, loading the dishes in the dishwasher.
Oh, I was going to get there. Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
We'll get there. And then we're going to get back to the deeper, harder stuff. But I think it's easy to start talking about the lighter stuff like crumbs or dishwasher. But the crumbs is a really good one, because if the conflict is I need a cleaner kitchen to feel more organized, but also that organization makes me feel less anxious and then therefore more productive. It's not just that I'm being annoyingly clean because it's just being annoying. I actually feel like my nervous system is more regulated when my environment is calmer around me. And that includes less crumbs on the kitchen counter. And I recognize your limitations in your eyesight. If I were to dismiss that as what you just said, weaponized incompetence. If I were to dismiss that as a real valid reason and truth of your challenges to seeing all the crumbs, I would stay annoyed and angry.
Well, and that's what's interesting. I always like saying, and actually my daughter parroted this line back to me recently. She was all excited. She shared this with her psychology professor at UC Santa Cruz, which I was quite proud of. But she was like, you always told me, pick the interpretation that serves you best. And it's really fascinating to me, like in that example of, if you understand that I'm doing my best and I just can't see as well as I would like, that interpretation serves you better in terms of how much it's going to trigger annoyance in you.
100%.
Whereas this other woman's interpretation of, oh my God, that's weaponized incompetence, which is an interpretation of he's doing it on purpose. He's purposefully trying to get out of work by acting stupid or not knowing. That interpretation is going to fuel anger, resentment, and annoyance.
100%. So when I can honor and accept your eyesight limitations as the reason why all the crumbs or the hair on the bathroom sink is not going to be picked up, I not only can accept it, I have compassion for it, and therefore it's not a conflict.
Well, that's a rough one. The shaving my whiskers when I trim my beard, they go all over the place, and so I try and clean them up. But man, they're just
well, and I get that they're hard
everywhere
for you to see, and I also have a higher degree of desire to get them gone.
And I think I'm doing my best.
You are doing your best. And that's all we can ask. And so like, I think this is a good example of some of those differences that if I continue to nitpick what you weren't doing versus the effort I saw that you are doing, we would stay in constant conflict. And most couples fight about the stupidest little shit.
Well, and it always frustrates me when we're working with couples, because one of the things we want them to do is encourage the effort that your partner's putting forth. And I would say most people in relationship are putting forth effort much of the time. Like, we're not trying to disappoint or annoy or offend the other person.
And if you are, own up to that shit and do better.
That's a totally different conversation. But it's frustrating because we got to reward the behaviors we want to see more of. So if you're putting forth effort towards a good end, a positive end, and you're not quite getting there, but you're making progress, damn, reward the effort over and over and over, because that's how we make change.
Right. So let's go back to the dishwasher, one of our favorites that, always resonates. So you tell your dishwasher version of the story.
Okay. So when we first started going out, you're an amazing cook.
Thank you.
Cook. It's one of many things that I'm really, really grateful about of your talents and skills.
Thank you.
And it's something I didn't really have much in my life prior to you. And so anyway, it's amazing. And so I want to do my part. I want to, if you're going to cook, I should clean up, to me. Right.
That seems fair and reasonable. I appreciate that.
And so I would, clear the dishes and clean the dishes and put them in the dishwasher and
hold on, John, I give you permission to embarrass me as much as possible in sharing the exact degree of commentary I would have. So you kind of highlighted one little piece of it, but like, just go all in. I can handle it. I'm good. I can handle this.
I'm just getting started.
I know.
So I would put the dishes in the dishwasher, and this was again early on. And then you would very quickly after me start to reorganize the dishes in the dishwasher. And my thought is, if I'm doing the work to put the dishes in the dishwasher and you're coming behind me and redoing the work that I just did, why don't you just do the dishes?
Right.
Because we're actually doing the work twice now.
Right.
And so that was a little bit frustrating to me, because to me, it doesn't make a damn bit of difference how the dishes are put in the dishwasher. That's what the dishwasher is for. It sprays water all over the place and soap, and then it rinses the dishes, and then the dishes get clean. And I know that you see it differently.
I do a little bit.
And then the other part is that there was an addition. There was a conversation that we had. This was probably a couple years in, where the girls were here and we were cleaning up, and you were sitting down after you had cooked, and we we brought up, what does doing the dishes mean to you? Because you might have brought this up because I think you had a different definition of what doing the dishes was to you than to the rest of humanity. And so you explained that doing the dishes meant not only clearing the dishes and cleaning the dishes and putting them in the dishwasher, but also taking the Windex out and Windexing every fucking counter in the house. Well,
every
at
surface.
least the kitchen. And so we were all kind of laughing and giving you a hard time. Like, that's not doing the dishes. That's doing the dishes and wiping down the counters
and cleaning up.
And so, however, to accommodate your needs, we started doing that.
Right.
And so that was just a little bit of my dishwasher story.
I didn't even realize the extent I was over attached to how I needed things to look. And you brought up one little sentence earlier. You haven't brought up again. I'm going to go back to it. As I would sit and watch you do the dishes, you would think that me watching my beloved, who is so grateful for my cooking and so appreciative of what he just ate, as I would sit at the kitchen counter and watch this handsome man of mine clean up, my nervous system started to bubble because of the stupid ways I was attached to how I wanted things done, including, John, the kitchen sponge is full of germs. And when you rest it on the counter in between the things you're cleaning, that really bothers me. Or
when I put things upside down to drop on the counter, that was a problem.
The salad spinner that is now upside down. So the surface area of wetness and then condensation's trapped inside.
Only temporarily.
Something about it just fucking
so let me ask you this. If we look back to this whole model that we have for couples work, and we look at, doing the relational work versus doing individual work.
We're doing therapy on Joree right now.
Those two do you think we're in right now?
Oh, this is a Joree issue, not a John issue.
Thank you.
Okay. The Joree issue there, as I talk about myself in third person, I don't know, Dr. John, help me figure out what was my issue.
Obviously, it's anal retentiveness, according to Freud.
I don't like anal all that much, though, John. Only sometimes. Sorry, TMI.
No, I think it's largely a matter of controlling your environment in order to assuage your anxiety.
Yes.
That to me is what it is.
Right.
And I get that. And so I want to help you out with that. I want you to feel safe. I want you to be regulated. I want you to feel calm.
And I think it's a great example of the nuances that really can get in the way of partnership.
Yeah.
And had I continued to stay over attached to my righteous belief of how things needed to be done in the cleanup process versus look at the end goal. Is the kitchen clean? Did the counters get wiped down?
Or 95% clean.
Sure. Clean enough to which I can really honor the effort rather than over attached to the way it was getting done.
Well, and that was one of the pieces I think that was difficult for me, is that you were dead set convinced that you were quote unquote right.
I've really worked on releasing that.
And I appreciate the hell out of that.
Have I gotten better?
Oh, way better, much better.
Okay.
100-fold. And
I think that was a little bit part of why you broke up with me, because I think you were afraid of how rigid I would be. Oh, that look on your face. I was afraid. I think you were afraid of how rigid I might be the rest of our life if I didn't learn how to loosen up on some of the things I was holding tightly to that really in the long run didn't make much of a difference.
No. And you're right. And I think the other thing that really helped in this area was lightening up, rediscovering your playfulness or discovering your playfulness, developing that thicker skin so that I could kind of kid with you and tease you about some of this stuff. So if it was, slightly annoying for me to do it, even though I'm trying to support you, I could tease you about it a little bit. And that made things much easier for me.
And likewise, you developing the thicker skin to not be overly sensitive
Mhm.
to perceived criticism if I gave feedback. So I could tease you. It had to go both ways.
Mhm.
And we're going to do a whole episode on the power of banter and playfulness and what we need underneath that. So that's not exactly our conversation now, but we'll come back to that some
Yeah.
more. And I, the dishwasher also to me, it's like playing Tetris. It's a puzzle. I like to organize it so that everything has a spot.
Which is fine
And
if you're
actually,
doing it.
it's fun for me. Like I actually really, really enjoy it. But I recognized how undermining it felt for you. And that was the key part of I don't want to undermine.
Well, and part of it is I think there's a callback to my marriage where it felt like most times, many of the times, nothing I did was ever good enough. And so I think that for me was part of my work to look back and like, what's the trigger here for me? And I think it's multi-layered.
Right. Well, okay. So now, let's turn the therapy on to you, John.
Oh, okay.
So underneath that for you was a sense of I'm not good enough.
Yeah, not worthy.
And so it then becomes nothing about the dishwasher.
Yeah. Well, and we had some of these other themes where I kind of internalized the message that whatever I do wasn't enough
Right.
for you.
I hope that's not true
frustrating.
anymore.
It's not.
And how did we get there? How did we overcome that?
Mm.
Dead silence.
Well, I had to think about that. Like, I think that part of it was the ongoing conversations that we've had about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think understanding your intentions more. I think being able to have those uncomfortable conversations over and over again to the point where I could believe it. I think that our work with psilocybin and MDMA was really helpful. I think
that really helped us to rewire some of our rigid patterns of thinking.
Yeah. And we'll do a show or a few shows about that down the road. I also think that the sessions with Charlie and Linda Bloom
our 12 hours of therapy. Yeah. Over 2 days.
And I think also the breakup was really helpful in the sense that it drove home the point of just how much I love you and gave me motivation to let some of that stuff go.
Right. What was more
and really work on letting it go.
Right. I think from my perspective, one was the more we talked about it, the less emotionally charged it could get. And we talk about this with our clients a lot, where going back to an issue multiple times and revisiting, not rehashing the issue from the point of getting reactivated by it, or he said, she said, but rehashing the dynamics so that we better understood the motivating factors underneath for each of us and what was underneath it and what were we thinking, feeling, and what wound was it speaking from?
Yeah. And
that
really
was
going
from
back
our
to
past.
specifics, like where was it that the trigger came up for you? What did I say? How did I say it? How could I say it differently? And was this really about us, or was this about past relationship or your child?
Well, that makes me think about Terry Real's work and relational couples work of understanding, do you want to be right or do you want to be connected? And when you can put the relationship first, then your own individual righteousness or wound driven behaviors or actions, you can soften those in favor of what serves the relationship right now.
Well, and to go back, I want to drive home the point on that. Would you rather be right, or would you rather be married, or would you rather be connected? Because it's huge.
It's huge.
In relational dynamics, we see it all the time with couples where they're so doggedly attached to their narrative, and the narrative that they are right and their partner is wrong. And if they would just admit how wrong they are and apologize and admit how right they are, everything would be fine.
Right.
But that it never happens, because there's always, well, almost always, two sides to every story. There's different perceptions, there's different understandings, different interpretations. And so there's no one objective reality, as far as I'm concerned, in a couple.
So if the source of conflict is ultimately, I want my partner to validate what I'm feeling, and an absence of them truly being able to hear what's underneath the argument, we'll stay in conflict. Would you agree?
Yeah.
And so the way out of that is recognizing that resolution in conflict doesn't come from convincing another to change their mind. All that we're working towards is how do we honor our differences? I need to become a cleaner person, which you already had, though, by the way, since we lived together. Thank you so much. I told you last night how much I appreciate you picking up after yourself. And it's not about changing the other person's, full way of being. We're trying to be complementary and be respectful. Because
let's go to politics before we get to the.
Well, I was going to jump in because, oftentimes I would say most often underneath our behaviors and actions are our values. And when we're being values driven, there's no wrong there.
Yeah, it's usually a misunderstanding about how the other is prioritizing their values compared to your values.
And it's perfectly fine if we don't have the exact same values. The key in partnership is, how do I respect what your values are and not shit on your values? Because ultimately then I'm shitting on you.
And let's give an example of that, just because that's pretty vague and 30,000 foot view. But the classic example I use is, husband comes home from work late. The wife has prepared dinner. It's a very 1950s Leave It to Beaver example, but bear with me. So the wife has gone to the trouble of making dinner, fed the kids. The dinner's now cold. Kids are in bed. Husband comes home at 9 p.m. and she's upset because he missed dinner and missed out on the effort that she put in to make a nice dinner for him and the family. He's upset because he just broke his back working a 12, 14-hour day. And if you look at it from a values perspective, there's no wrong there. She's focusing on nurturing the family, providing sustenance for the family.
Quality time.
He's valuing providing for the family.
Right.
There's no wrong in those two values. It's just a matter of what value are you prioritizing as number one and number two in that moment.
Right. Well, and the key there that usually breaks down that particular dynamic is a lack of communication, right? So the more we can,
quickness to anger,
right? There's so many layers actually. So, to be able to counteract that dynamic is the conversation around, hey, honey, just so you know, I'm going to be late for dinner. It's been an extra long day at work. I appreciate, that you put in this work for the family and for dinner. I'm sorry, I'm going to miss it. So, communicating where we're coming from, what's underneath our actions, expressing gratitude and appreciation for the other. And that all sounds like a lot of work for couples to do when they're pissed and annoyed and angry.
Yeah. And so let's turn to politics, because this one interests me. We got the election coming up here in a couple weeks.
Well, no, as this episode comes out, it's election day.
Okay. It's election day today, not right now, but I guess in the future.
Yeah.
in this alternative reality. And it's interesting to me because I remember a time, I don't know, 12, 14, 16 years ago, when I could have conversations. I'm a Democrat, and I could have conversations with a Republican, and I could listen calmly and respectfully to what they say. They could listen to what I was saying and thinking and believing. We could get at what our values are driving those beliefs. And even if we didn't agree, for the most part, we could respect the values behind it. And like, for instance, I know like most Republicans highly value the in-group versus the out-group based on research by John Haidt. Now, the in-group is typically white Republicans. And that might vary a little bit, but for Democrats, the in-group is humanity. And so then when you overlay something like immigration on it, then it's a totally different ballgame in the sense of, if I'm looking at that from immigrants coming in and being a threat to my in-group, I'm going to fight like hell to prevent that. Then it's an existential threat to who I am and my family and my well-being. If I see all of humanity as my in-group, then people coming in from other countries is just people coming in from other countries.
And could actually support our
trying to find their way. And I believe that, they don't take food off our table. They actually help put food on our table, to quote Chavez.
So we know that since 2016, there has been an incredible disparity among the different parties. And we have seen this show up in couples. So let's speak to a few minutes of couples who share different political beliefs. This is going to fall into one of the categories that are the 67% of things in a relationship that can't be solved. So, John, share from your perspective, what would be great ways that couples can manage this values different? Because that's really what's underneath it, without it affecting the structure, safety, quality of their partnership.
Well, yeah, let me go back a step prior to that, because recently I wrote an article supporting Kamala Harris in my newsletter to my 6,000 newsletter subscribers. And I got some really heated attacks from some of the people that get my newsletter. Attacks that went after my masculinity, my intelligence, my sexuality, told me that I shouldn't be doing things like this. I'm a psychologist, stick to psychology. They called me spineless. And I wrote them all back. And I said, I think you need to cool your jets here a little bit. Let me ask you a question. This is primarily an anger management newsletter. Why are you coming at me in such anger? I did nothing wrong. I expressed my opinion in my newsletter, which you are free to read or not read. You are free to subscribe to or unsubscribe from. I'm not making you do anything. I didn't attack you. I didn't call you names. I didn't threaten you. I did nothing to you. Why are you coming at me with vitriol and insult? Like, this is one of the fundamental problems in our country right now.
Right.
That we are so thin-skinned and our perception of the other side is so demonic that we can't even manage our emotions well enough to listen to the other side.
Well, I think
we see it as a personal attack.
Well, and I think you said a key word there. It's emotional management. And if we are not able to manage our emotions, then we're not going to be able to even find the opportunity for healthy discourse.
And this guy, he was coming at me from a Christian perspective. And I said, look, brother, you need to take the beam out of your own eye first. Like, I did nothing wrong here. You're coming at me with an attack.
Yeah.
What would Jesus say about that? I know damn well what Jesus would say about that. He'd say you're wrong. And until we can actually manage our emotions well enough to act like adults and have like calm conversations, we're in trouble. And that's part of the problem in this political discourse, is that it's become so polarized that most of each side sees the other as evil.
So again, bringing it back to couples, how do we manage that?
Well, I think we got to go back to curiosity. We got to go back to respect. We got to go back to being curious about what are the values driving these beliefs. And like, if your value is, fear for your family's safety over immigration, all right, cool. I can respect that. If your value is protecting the in-group, cool. I can respect it. I don't agree with it, in the way that you do, but I can respect where you're coming from. I can respect that you want isolationism as a foreign policy for the United States, that you don't think we should be going around getting involved in other people's wars, that you don't think we should be involved in NATO. Again, I don't agree with that.
Right.
But I respect where you're coming from, and I can hear you, and I can validate what you feel and what you think. I don't have to agree with you, though.
Well, and I think the key there and the tool for couples to practice in all areas of disagreement is non-defensive listening. Which is really hard to do if you can't manage your emotions.
Right. Well, and I think empathy, validation. Yeah.
Right. But I think, from the get-go,
right.
Our initial response, if it's defensive or if it's a put down or a shutdown of those values, or you're wrong, I'm right.
I roll.
Sigh. Right. We're using politics here as the example for today, but these tools are the same regardless of the discourse.
This is just the hardest area to implement them, I would say, right now.
And, and this goes for family and friends, right? This isn't just couples now we're talking about. It's how do we have healthy conversations when we disagree? When it is 1,000% under that category of 67% of things that can't be solved.
And I think the other thing about this, just in general with political views, is I'm a really big fan of epistemology, which is a really fancy philosophy word for what's the basis, what are we basing our knowledge on? And I think it's really important for all of us to severely and seriously question, what are we basing our beliefs on? Because it's my understanding from doing years of research on this, that typically what we're doing, we're basing our beliefs on our feelings, and our feelings are not based on much at all. And the feelings are then quickly, and by quickly, I mean like a third of a second, covered up in a rationalization so that you believe you're being rational.
Hmm.
And I'll ask everyone, like, okay, so what do you base that belief on? And if you keep drilling down, what do you base that belief on? Pretty soon you're basing it on nothing,
Hmm.
or it's hearsay. And so the problem also, I think, is, there's a large majority in the United States that don't trust science or
Yeah.
research anymore. And it's like, well, if you don't trust science and research in large numbers, what do you trust?
Yeah.
And I think it's a real problem, because we're living in a post-truth world. And I don't think a lot of times we can even agree on a fact.
Well, and we recently went to an incredible talk at UC Berkeley by one of the world's leading researchers on AI and deep fakes. And there's really good evidence to believe that we can't even trust what we see online and social media as being real and factual.
Yeah, that the fakes for videos now have gotten so good, they can fool the experts. You can't even discern differences with subtle neck muscle movements or emotional expressions.
Right. And what they can take 20 seconds of someone's existing video, and from that 20 seconds create an entire long in-depth video just using 20 seconds of data.
Making you say anything. And one of the things that he was truly concerned about, and he's seen this in an Eastern European country already, is that, let's say Kamala wins and Trump loses, that he thinks it's highly likely that a fake video will be made of Kamala saying that she rigged the election, which is going to sow chaos. And this, I mean, highly likely it could come from China or Russia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're already seeing they've been screwing in our elections for years at this point and sowing disinformation.
Yeah, it's that I left leaving that talk very fearful for the future of the safety of our world and information. And it, when we get so rigid in our belief system and we're unable to be open to hearing another perspective, another side, I think that's where the real breakdown happens with couples, relationships, family members, friends who have this different discourse. And so let's talk for a second about how to stay emotionally regulated and what that even means when you're in heated conversations about things that are not going to necessarily change, but maybe like, okay, what's the tangible practice there? What do I actually do so that we don't get more disconnected?
Yeah, I think the first thing is practicing some self-awareness techniques.
To even notice that
mindfulness,
meditation. I think the self-awareness to notice
breathing,
what it feels like in your body to start feeling dysregulated.
Yeah.
The heart rate increase, pit in your stomach, blood starting to boil, and thoughts racing.
I think you're right. And part of the problem I see with most of the men that I work with, and I think most of the men out there, is that we don't even know what it feels like to be truly relaxed. That we have our sympathetic nervous system, the fight, flight, freeze, or stress response, active the vast majority, if not all the time. And I think about the things that men like, okay, we got business, right? We're at work. And then we go home, and what do we do in our spare time? We'll race a motorcycle, we'll drive a car fast, we're going to watch action movies where people are shooting and killing each other. We're going to watch,
for all men.
It's a lot. We're going to watch sports. We're going to watch football. We're going to watch basketball where our team's losing and we get activated by the calls from the refs. Right. And it just, if you look at the emotional palette of what we do during our free time, the vast majority of it is activating that stress response, that, where
turning
your body,
on the nervous system.
Yeah. And I don't think that we really know what it feels like to relax. So if we don't know what it feels like to be relaxed, how can we even get to that point of being in a difficult conversation and try to get to relaxed?
Well, let's do an entire episode on how to activate the relaxation response. Okay. And I think that would be really helpful, because for many people listening, this might just feel conceptual and a nice ideal, but they still don't know how to get there.
Well, and let me tell you the thing that really fries me about this whole concept, particularly with men, because that's who I generally deal with, is if we can't truly relax, we've effectively cut off the possibility of experiencing more than half the positive emotions out there. Yeah. So we're shooting ourselves in the foot in terms of our own happiness.
Right.
And that really frustrates me, because my goal for everyone is to be happier ultimately. And I don't care what your political beliefs are.
Right. Well, let's take this a couple other relational examples that, these conflicts get in the way of connection and resolution. And one of the things that we see with a handful of our clients is financial infidelity or financial misspending that feels like a breach of trust. And
it is
based on different factors that make either talking about money difficult, or a lot of, I don't know, we've seen low self-worth and having a fear of rejection if they made a poor financial choice, and doing things to continue to cover it up, fear of a reactive response from their partners. So it's better off to not share anything than to share the maybe mistake I might have made. So, again, if some of these challenges, and I guess financial alignment is probably not within the 67% that can't be solved, because I think you can work towards resolution on understanding how to share your money and how to spend it. And money seems to be a hot topic that would maybe be up there with politics for couples.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot wrapped up in that. I know for most of us, there's worth issues wrapped up in this. I know for men, we're supposed to be the provider. So if we're earning less than our spouse, that can hit us at a soft spot. If we screw up an investment, or if we lose money, that it makes us feel unworthy. I would think for most, it makes us feel shame. And so then we want to cover it up because we don't want to share it because we're too ashamed, which makes the whole problem worse.
So what would be, if that's a typical struggle for men, what would be a way to practice some vulnerability around that, so as to not further the chasm in the relationship of this issue?
Well, I think the first step would be to practice transparency around the issues early on.
Yeah.
So that you have the ability to have these conversations, so that when something difficult does arise, you're better equipped to talk about it. I think most people struggle to talk about finances in any case, because it's an emotionally charged issue. We got so much wrapped up in money. What was our family like growing up? Did we have money? Did we not have money? What were the rules that we learned about it? Does money grow on trees, or do we have to tighten our belt? Like,
what is the emotional context?
What do we believe about wealthy people? Are wealthy people assholes, or wealthy people, have they earned their money? Like, there's a lot of kind of hidden rules that we have, and there's a lot tied up in money.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of partners that we've talked to in couples counseling that see money as security. Some see it as freedom. Some see it as the ability to travel. Some see it as the key to happiness. And so to be able to have those conversations about, what does it mean to you? What was it like for you growing up? How much did you have? What are your beliefs about money?
Yeah. What's the story around that?
Yeah.
That's been something that I've had fascinating practice in, looking at my different narratives and belief and an emotional response to money. And it's been hard to talk about at times, and it's interesting in couples. I remember for you and I, years ago, we had, I think it was, I don't know if it was a night or a weekend away up to Napa to see Chris Isaak in concert. And it was so exciting. I mean, Chris Isaak threw me his guitar pick. No joke. Like, that was an epic moment. But we had a nice.
I thought he threw it at me and I gave it to you.
Burst my bubble. Chris Isaak,
I'm sorry, he threw it to you. He threw it to you. I was totally wrong.
Anyhow, I recall that we had a challenge after that weekend because you had felt we spent too much money. And when you named that, it to me felt like you then didn't value the nice weekend we had. Do you remember that? And that was coming from, I think a position of where you were soon after your divorce, and where money might have felt more scarce versus abundant. And I was coming from a place of, we just had this beautiful connection. Why are we now bringing up the hard part underneath it? And no one's wrong there. And if I were to approach or react to you and be like, oh my God, I can't believe you just like ruined the image of this nice weekend because you were overwhelmed with what we spent. Or if you would have come to me and said, I can't believe you assumed that we could have done all that, whatever it was, it could have come across as a personal attack. And I don't think that's how it ended up. I think it was more of a, thank you for sharing how you're feeling. Let's be mindful together going forward to make sure we're consciously making the choices along the way that align with both of our needs. And so I think that's a good example in which we could see where those differences create bigger problems versus hearing, thanks for sharing how you're feeling.
Yeah.
I will be aware of that from both of our sides.
Well, so that goes back to the curiosity and non-defensive listening and how important it is so that your partner feels seen, heard, and validated. And then it doesn't create, it's not one of the paper cuts that accumulate and lead to the change in perception of your partner being all good to all bad.
Right. Because I could take that example to an extreme and be like, oh my God, he never wants to have a nice weekend away ever again. And you could take that to the extreme of like, she wants to spend without caring.
Mm-hmm.
And then if we take those belief systems and then over attach it to other behaviors, and we're stuck in that viewpoint of each other, that's going to feel really hard to come back from.
Yeah. So being willing to look at both of our narratives around whatever the issue is.
Right. Whether, and, you know, I don't even think we've got time to jump into this one. So this will also have to be an entire other conversation. And one that we see a lot of couples really stuck in is differences in child rearing.
Mm-hmm.
And with that also comes bringing in the, how do I want to say, the values or patterns that they each have from their family of origin in creating their new family together with their kids, and boundaries around that. Again, huge conflict, right? Let's say one partner is really close with her family and the partner doesn't really get along with them. How do we balance? That might be one of those 67% of things that can't really be fixed. So how do we get through it in a way that doesn't lead to more and more and more disconnection?
Yeah. Yeah. How do you lean into what your partner wants and needs in order to help them co-regulate?
There are so many factors that get in the way of connection.
Mm-hmm.
And if I were to start to sum up this episode, I think it's probably a really helpful conversation for partners to sit down and say, what are those areas in our lives that do fall under that 67%? That we continue to fight about, to convince each other or shame or blame or each other or get defensive around, that is only creating a bigger problem.
Well, and I would say, because if you find that it does fall in the bucket of the unresolvable, then the best you can do is to listen with curiosity, to validate how they feel, and to listen non-judgmentally, without trying to solve it or fix it.
Well, and we know in the current research of John and Julie Gottman in their recent book that came out within the past year called Fight Right, we do know that they say when you're having an argument with your partner, there's only one thing that you're supposed to accomplish: regulate your nervous system. When you're activated, and you know what that feels like, I said it a few moments ago, heart increase, blood boiling, tension, tightness, pit in the stomach,
negative thoughts,
right? That rumination. If you are stuck in any of that activated nervous system, you're never going to get to resolution. So the only goal when you're activated is to calm your body down. And then once you're calm, then come back to the conversation. If you're trying to have the conversation when you're activated, it's going to escalate, causing greater disconnection.
And if you get triggered or activated in the follow-up conversation,
take another break.
Take a break. Try it again.
And they say it actually takes minimum of 20 minutes to take a break.
20 minutes of not thinking about the issue at hand.
Which means letting it be okay to put the conversation on pause. Now, I will say one little caveat there. For someone who used to have a more anxious attachment, if you were to say to me in the midst of a disconnection or argument or, being frustrated with each other, hey, Joree, I need to take a break. I'm going to go over here for, the next 20 minutes plus, that would have felt like abandonment to me. So the key there, and this is also in the Gottman's research, is let your partner know when you're coming back. Because if you say, hey, I need 20 minutes and then I will check back in, that would make me feel more calm and that it didn't feel like abandonment.
And then make sure you're back by that time.
Right. So they say minimum of 20 minutes, no more than 24 hours, which during the height of our not so great parts of our relationship, it extended to 24 hours, which was super dysregulating. I don't recommend that. But this is one of the ways to intervene when you're stuck.
I totally recommend the 24 hours.
Hey.
Personal differences.
Not so much being relational right there. He takes that back, right?
What?
Yeah.
No, 20 minutes to 24 hours.
Okay, but not 24 hours of abandonment for me. That was too much.
Yeah, I mean, if I know who you are and I know what your tendencies are, I would not do that.
Again, ever. Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyhow, I hope this was a helpful conversation for you to listen to. I really think this model applies to no matter what challenge that you're facing with your partner. Is recognize what are the values underneath their behaviors, their actions, their belief systems. See if you can be curious, stay open, be less defensive, less reactive. We don't want to look to blame, shame, or judge someone's beliefs. We're looking for ways to find compromise, to stay open-minded, And one of the best interventions to defensive listening is thank you for sharing how you feel. Doesn't mean we have to like it. And I think that's the key. I'm not going to
agree.
I'm not always going to like what you think or feel or want. I'm not always going to agree with it. So what's my goal there then? Well, I don't want to be disconnected. I know that feels worse.
Yeah, that's the highest goal.
Well, and I also know that, in my roots of practicing and teaching mindfulness, one of the best ways to reduce our suffering is to accept what's here. So the more I can accept who you are and the less I judge who you are, I will feel much better.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of radical acceptance.
And so, going back to the crumbs, I can accept you don't have great eyesight and therefore may not be able to pick up things to my standard. I accept that fully. Therefore, it's not a bother for me whatsoever.
Thank you, though.
You're welcome. Anyhow, this was a fun conversation.
Yeah,
I hope you guys found this, some good takeaways that you can begin to implement into your own relationship to reduce conflict and increase connection so that you have a happy, thriving, fulfilling, intimate, vulnerable, safe, secure, fun, playful, loving relationship.
And as always, thank you for listening. If you like this, please be sure to rate, review, and share.
And we will see you next time.